Good evening. It is Wednesday, September 7th, 7 p.m., and I'll call to order the Ottawa City Commission meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Crowley,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore,
Present.
Commissioner Kaler,
Present.
Commissioner Graves,
Present.
Commissioner Clayton.
Present.
All right, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight, whether you're listening to us on some form of media or whether you're in the audience. We will start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by our invocation from Father Kenneth Clem from Sacred Heart Church. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we ask you to send your Holy Spirit down upon all of us gathered here today, that we pray for those gifts of understanding, of wisdom here for all of our elected officials here as they answer that call to govern here responsibly this beautiful city that you have gifted us. We ask for indeed those gifts of patience, of understanding, of wisdom, of grace for all of us gathered in Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Father. That'll move us on to our consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from our August 17th regular meeting. Also, the election of Mayor Eric Crowley, Mayor Pro Tem Mike Skidmore, and Commissioner Zach Clayton as voting delegates for League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Conference in October, with the alternates are Commissioner Sarah Kaler and City Manager Neinstedt, and our agenda approval. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. That will move us on to item 9, which is public comments. Do we have any?
We have none today.
Thank you. That'll move us on to item 10, which is our declaration. At this time, I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Hearing none, we'll move to item 11.
Request for approval to purchase the Ottawa Country Club Association, including its assets and liabilities.
The purchase would include the equity interest of the club and the extension of the club's assets and debts. The assets would be used for park and recreational purposes. And I believe we'll start with hearing from Kathy Gredencourt.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Honorable City Commission, the Ottawa Country Club equity members have voted to accept the offer from the City of Ottawa to purchase the Ottawa Country Club at 101 East Logan, in large part because of our strong desire to maintain the golf course in our city. We are asking the Commission to proceed with the purchase of the club. Thank you for your commitment to the quality of life in our community.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Kathy while she's up? All right. Legal counsel, Mr. Finch, how are you this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I did attend the meeting the other night of the equity members of the Ottawa Country Club Association. Commissioner Skidmore came to talk about what the city might be willing to do, along with the finance director, Melanie Landis, and talk to the equity members. You'll recall that preliminarily there was consensus for us to look at some acquisition of the corporate structure of the Ottawa Country Club Association, which would include its assets and liabilities. Its primary asset being the golf course, liabilities being a note payable to the bank, and also a little bit of outstanding tax debt that needs to be cleared up, and then also to acquire through purchase the equity members. There are 33 equity members of the club, each who put in $3,600, and the city will pay those equity members for their interests, only what they have paid in, so they will not realize any profit on that. Essentially, you are acquiring the assets and liabilities of the club for the equity and asset minus debt value, which is a little bit unheard of in that you're basically buying a company for book value. And that's all with the understanding, I think, of the membership of the club that this is a unique situation where the city is willing to step in and try to preserve this quality of life amenity for the community and preserve another recreational asset for the community. So from here, if the board votes tonight, we're asking you for authorization for city staff to enter into the contracts and agreements that will be necessary to give effect to this agreement. And then we will go from there to work through the process of acquiring the equity membership and then eventually acquiring the club itself, and then we'll work with you to pay off the liabilities, and at the end of the day then transfer the physical property probably through donation, since this is a not-for-profit corporation, to the city. And the timeline on this would roughly be by the end of the year. We'd like to have this all wrapped up. So I'll stand for any questions you have about the arrangement.
I just want to say I'm just was impressed with the participation when 31, I believe, of the 33 voting members were there. And I do also appreciate the other two offers that came in, that they were willing to also keep this as a golf course, and that was critical for our decision as well. And I want to commend them also for being there and making their pitch as well. But I'm really pleased the city bought it too. I feel like this is one of the amenities we have to offer. We have swimming pools, we have parks, we have a nice hospital, a good school system, and I think a golf course is one thing that companies look for when they plan to relocate or expand to a city. So I'm really pleased that we're able to make this this offer, and I would make the motion we approve item number 11 on our agenda.
Is there a second, Commissioners?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Take your pick.
I would agree with what Mike said and just, I know I've said it before, but it's not unusual for a city to have a municipal golf course. And it's something that can be appreciated, so I'm definitely in favor of it.
Any other comments? Can I have the roll call, please?
How do you vote, Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton?
Yes.
And Mayor Crowley?
And I vote yes. Motion is approved. Thank you both for showing up tonight. You can stay if you'd like. I mean, there's only a few more things to discuss tonight.
Or bring treats back,
Yeah.
maybe
Please, some
later.
dinner.
Yeah. Well,
And Mr. Finch, thank you. We appreciate your work on this also.
That's right.
That will move us on to item 12.
Public hearing for revenue neutral rate and 2023 operating budget.
Preliminary comments by the Director of Finance, Melanie Landis. This public hearing has been scheduled to receive comment on this matter, and I will open the hearing.
Thank you. This short presentation is really, as a precursor, very short presentation, to actually the three items that are on here, which is the public hearing, the resolution for the revenue neutral rate, and the adoption of the 23 budget. Next slide, please. The first item that you will consider this evening is the opportunity or option to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And we've talked about how this has been calculated. This is just a summary page to show you that the revenue neutral rate that we received from the county is 41.536. The published mill rate that we have prepared, proposed, and presented to you up to this point is 45.968. If you were to choose to reduce the budget authority for the 4 mill levy property tax supported funds, you would need to cut a total of $540,912 in order to meet that revenue neutral rate. Next slide, please. In our budget, I think it's important to note that we do have community partner support built into this budget overall to the tune of $178,000. That is in support of 8 community partners. Plus, we had an additional request this year, which is not included in this budget presentation or the proposed budget. These funds are collected, or they're put into a separate fund that is used to support these community agencies. It is supported equally by 4 funds. It's the general fund, water fund, wastewater fund, and electric fund. Next slide, please. This is a very busy graph. It's really not intended to give you any numbers, but just to show you the number of services, functions, things that are supported by the property tax dollars in a very broad level of how those the depth of which each one of those are supported by those property tax dollars. Next slide, please. This is, I pulled out a few functions across the city that we typically think of when you think of city services, and just to show you by each dollar of property tax how or at what level those functions are supported by $1 of property tax. Everywhere from public safety at 27 cents per $1, to parks at 3 cents per $1, streets at 6 cents per $1. Just to give you an idea, 3 cents for the auditorium of each $1 that you contribute towards the property tax supporting these functions. Next slide, please. This is a breakdown of the city taxes as a comparison from last year to what's being proposed for this year. There is, I did on the left-hand side, I do have to make a note here. For anyone watching or going back to look at this, that 10.67%, which is the home value increase from last year to this year, I simply needed a number to use. That is the number that our assessed valuation went up overall. It does not mean that each home went up 10%. It doesn't mean that any of the residential homes went up 10%. It was simply a number to use for illustration purposes to show that for taxing purposes, city funds only, or the city tax levy only. On the right, you can see the difference between those home values from last year in the blue to this year in the green. And those differences range anywhere from $56 to $198 for 1 year. The overall budget that's been presented to you is $5,610,000, $387 in property tax or ad valorem dollars. $54,477,412 is the total budget. Those total dollars are not all expected expenditures. They are, some of them, most of those funds do include reserve amounts. So that is not a number that should scare anyone away from those aren't anticipated to all be spent in 1 year. But there is a budget authority for each one of those funds in order for us to be able to make the expenditures necessary for each of those functions. With that, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer, but I believe that you could probably continue the public hearing with any questions, and then we can move ahead with the other two items after that.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comment for Director Landis? Would anybody from the public like to make a comment on this public hearing? Please come on up.
Just not a comment, but just a quick question. This is the first time I've been to one of these or anything about this. So when you said per household, I think I understood, it could be $60 to $100 additional from last year?
Yes.
Is that correct?
It would depend on the assessed value for your
Okay.
appraised value that you get in your notice from the county. That is what it would depend on that value.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am,
And ma'am, ma'am,
Oh, sorry.
excuse me, and that, we're only talking about the city portion here.
I'm in city, so.
All right.
could
Okay.
could I have you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure, Darlene Stone, 603 East 9th.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Would anybody else from the public like to make a comment? Last time, anybody from the public like to make a comment? I will close the hearing. That'll move us on to item 13.
Request for approval of resolution to levy property tax exceeding the revenue neutral rate.
The revenue neutral rate for the city was calculated at 41.536 mils by the Franklin County Clerk. As the resolution states, the city shall levy a property tax rate exceeding the revenue neutral rate of 41.536 mils and not exceeding the published maximum rate of 45.968 mils. Director Landis?
I don't have any further comments unless you have questions of me. I'm happy to answer.
Commissioners?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move that we approve the request as listed in item 13 in our agenda.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
How do you vote, Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Graves,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler,
Yes.
and Mayor Crowley.
I vote yes, motion is approved. That will move us on to item 14.
Consider adoption of the 2023 operating budget.
The commission heard presentations from city staff and held a public hearing regarding the proposed 2023 operating budget of $54,477,412, with an estimated mill rate of 45.968. The commission can adopt a budget that is the same or less than the public expenditures ad valorem and estimated tax rate for each fund, but not more than the published amounts. Director Landis.
I really only some comments on the budget process overall, is just to basically thank everybody who was involved, everyone from the staff level to management and to the commission who heard lots of discussion and had lots of discussion. And really, I think, good, productive discussion. And just the 23 budget does preserve a high quality of life for our community. It maintains and improves public infrastructure and public facilities, supports community services, and is a responsible fiscal management of our operational activities and additions of personnel and replacement of aged equipment and vehicles. And with that, I think we've talked about everything this evening and in previous evenings. So I'm available for questions, as is management and staff as well.
Commissioners, any questions? How would you like to act on item 14?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion that we consider adoption, or that we adopt the 2023 operating budget as line 14 states.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
I just mentioned the discussion, the amount of work, and we really do appreciate the department heads and Melanie especially, you putting this together for us. We're not just talking about these numbers tonight. We've been talking about these for several months, I know, and so it doesn't seem like it's not a flippant decision, but it's an important decision we all have to make. And I think about, too, I've been in foreign country where you can't drink the running water and the electricity is sporadic at best, and open sewers. And I think about those things a lot of times when we come into the budget season, because we trust our water. We have electricity, and we have buried sewers, and all the things that we kind of think of should be there, and that we take them for granted sometimes. And so I appreciate the city working together like we have in this budget. Not everybody got what they wanted in the departments, and some did, and we really worked out and negotiated a good budget here. So I'm very proud of this, and I'll be voting yes on it when it comes to him to vote.
I too would also like to say thank you. I know we think it's exhausting to go through, a few months of this discussion, but we don't see we don't see what happens behind the scenes, the day in and day out work that you and your staff put in to putting this budget together and handling the questions that we have for you and trying to adjust the numbers and, certainly make us happy up here so we can make the folks that are happy out there in the public. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done, and I think it's really kind of been streamlined this year. I do appreciate the additional graphs that you put in this evening. You always hear somebody say, my tax dollars, why aren't the roads great? Well, look at the graph. The pie graph says only, I think, 2 cents or something went to roads, that it's all spread out, and it goes to, the places that it needs to, but those graphs, I think, could certainly be valuable to folks when they want to know where every dollar is going to, so. Appreciate all the hard work that your staff and you have put in this year.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Can we have a roll call, please?
How do you vote? Commissioner Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore?
Yes.
And Mayor Crowley.
I vote yes. Motion is approved. Thank you, Director Landis.
Thank you.
That'll move us on to item 15.
Request for approval of recommendation to add property at 503-505 North Main to the Neighborhood Revitalization Program.
The Neighborhood Revitalization Program Review Committee has reviewed this application and recommends the property be added to the program. Good evening, Director Hall.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. You reviewed this at the study session on August 22nd, and it is a application for tax rebates under the Neighborhood Revitalization Program. The project is a remodel of a commercial building to convert the ground floor of both 503 and 505 North Main from retail to 2 residential apartments. There's an existing apartment on the second floor. The increase in value is estimated at $85,000 on the current existing value appraised at $170,000. and I'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Commissioners, any questions for Director Hall?
If there are no questions, as the member of the Neighborhood Revitalization Program Review Committee, I would move that we approve the recommendation in item 15.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Can we have a roll call, please?
How do you vote, Commissioner Kaler? Commissioner Clayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Graves?
Yes.
And Mayor Crowley?
I vote yes, motion is approved. That'll move us on to item 16.
Moderate income housing proposals.
The city received 3 proposals from a moderate income housing MIH grant application. Staff will outline the grant process. The city commission will discuss each application and may ask questions of the applicants.
Thank you. What I thought I'd do is go through the first several slides. We went through those before. I can summarize the high points, and then we can get into the descriptions of each of the projects. If you want me to do something different, I can. I believe 2 of the developers that submitted proposals are here. I don't know if one of the developers is on Zoom. I believe our consultant Susan Galmore is participating via Zoom. But I'll just summarize these and go forward if you'd like.
That'll be fine.
Learned that is kind of different than what you see on this slide is we're expecting that the first, the announcements of the awards for the first round of the MIH grant applications would happen in November. What we learned last week is that any project that has the housing investment tax credits as a funding source, those are not going to be announced until December. And so we really won't know until December. I think what's important about that is the second round application deadline is at the end of January, at least it's anticipated to be. Next slide, please. So I think the important point here is that each eligible city or county may receive up to $650,000 in MIH grant funds per application round. Each application may include multiple projects. Just something I'm not sure I mentioned at the last meeting, but as you select projects, you'll want to rank those in order of priority or express your priorities for those projects. Next slide, please. So this kind of gets to the deadline. The application deadline is September 30. And at the last meeting, you talked about when you might be able to make a decision to select some projects. Tonight's really to discuss, as I understand, and to ask questions of the developers, the people that propose these projects. And so potentially you might want to think about next week as a meeting to make a selection. What was discussed at the last meeting was September 14th, but that's something you might want to think about tonight. Next slide. So this is an important slide. The criteria are, does the project help satisfy the need for workforce housing? That's really the whole point. That's how it relates to Ottawa anyway. One of the challenges that I've learned is that we are attracting industry, we are attracting development and business, but the thing that could be holding us back is we don't have enough housing to accommodate the workforce. Another of the criteria, can the developer complete the project within 18 months of the MIH grant award? Something that's been discussed, something that we heard discussed at the housing conference last week was this could be unrealistic for some projects, but the idea is that we want to try to we want to try to have the project be completed in 18 months, or at least close to that. It's important that the project be shovel-ready. Shovel-ready means there's not a lot of uncertainty associated with it. There aren't a lot of other steps to go through to make sure it's a project. One thing you don't want to do is select a project, it get approved, and then that project doesn't get built. That would not be a good outcome. Are the plans and information sufficient for the September 2022 application? I'd say all these projects the plans are pretty complete. One of the projects is the plans are less developed than the others, and that's the project at Davis and Wilson, the 32-unit apartment project. They submitted a very conceptual site plan, but on the other hand, the site is pretty large. It's 3.6 acres, so it should be able to accommodate 32 units easily, but plans aren't fully developed, I would say. Is the return on investment acceptable? And different ways of looking at this, but one way to do it that's relatively simple is what's the funding per unit that's being requested? So in these proposals we got, it ranges from 15,000 per unit to 36,000 per unit. That's the MIH funding. Another way to look at it is what's the funding requested per the cost of the project. And so some of the projects might have a higher level of MIH funding relative to the overall cost. Can the project be leveraged with other resources? So one of those resources is a rural housing investment district. And we have a rural housing investment district at Prairie View Estates. One of the proposals is for phase 2 of Prairie View Estates. And so there's an existing RHID at that location. One of the other projects, the project at Wilson and Davis, they're proposing that RHID be a source of funding. The RHID has not been approved yet. Can it be approved? Probably, but that hasn't happened yet. That's a step that would have to be taken. Another potential form of leverage is neighborhood revitalization program. Neighborhood revitalization program for eligible projects, they get a tax rebate. The owner and any subsequent owners receive a rebate on their taxes equal to 95% of the increase in value. And that's for 10 years for a new housing unit. Next slide, please. So the recommendation based on the criteria, Prairie View Estates Phase 2 by Ottawa MIH Partners, that's 7 duplexes near North Cherry and Enterprise Street. The other next project is recommended is a new duplex at 901, 903 South Walnut. This is Project A by Heartland Design Build LLC. And the third project that's recommended is 4 new single-family homes at North Cedar and East Red Jacket Street by Heartland Design Build LLC. All of these, with the MIH funding proposed, it would be less than the maximum of 650. It comes to like 620, I believe, 630. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through these projects. The first one is Project A by Heartland Design Build LLC. This is a 2-story townhouse-style apartment building, 2 units, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath in one of the units, 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath in the other unit. The rent rates are shown up here. One thing I want to point out is on all these projects, we looked at the rents and the sale price proposed, and they all easily fall within the range of moderate income housing based on the chart. Project cost for this is $371,250. The funding request is $40,000. This is in the neighborhood revitalization area. Next slide. These are floor plans of this project. Next slide. Building elevations. Again, they're townhouse style apartments, so each unit is 2 stories. Next slide. So this is the next project, Project B by Heartland Design Build, 4 detached single-family homes at North Cedar and East Red Jacket Street. This is the completion of the Lincoln School project and the homes that have already been built up in that area. These homes would be built for rent, 3-bedroom. 2 of them are 3-bedroom, 2-bath units. 2 are 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. Project cost total is $777,000. The total funding request is $80,000, MIH funding that is, and that equates to $20,000 per unit. Next slide. This is a floor plan of the. This is the 3-bedroom home that's shown up here. The floor plan and elevation. Next slide. This is the next project. This is in Westwood Circle. And this is 4 detached single-family homes built for sale. And the Purchase price anticipated is $300,000. And what's proposed is for each of the homes, $15,000 in MIH funding would go to pay for the home. So it would be assistance to the buyer in making a down payment. Total project cost is $1.2 million. Total funding request is $60,000 or $15,000 per home. Next slide. This is just a floor plan of this project, of the homes for this project. Next slide. So this is also by Heartland Design Build. It's a renovation of a single-family home. 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, involves reconfiguring the living room and kitchen, adding a half bath, rear deck, and a detached garage. Project cost is $176,000 estimated, and the funding request is $20,000. Next slide. And that's the existing home. Next slide, please. So this is the project proposed by Pinnacle Component Systems. This is a 32 townhouse style apartment project in 4 8-unit buildings. In terms of kind of biggest bang for the buck, maybe not biggest bang for the buck, but the most substantial project in terms of meeting workforce housing goals, this is probably it, because it's 32 apartment units. Each unit's 2-bedroom, 2-bath, $1,050 per month rent estimated. Project cost is $6.3 million. The funding request is $650,000. Other funding sources proposed, RHID and housing investor tax credits. Next slide, please. These are the floor plans and building elevations of this project. Next slide. This is the last proposal by Ottawa MIH Partners, also known as Prairie Fire. This is phase 2 of this duplex subdivision project. This phase includes 14 units in 7 duplex buildings. This also includes connecting the public street. There's the previous phase, which was funded by MIH funds awarded in 2017. That included a subdivision, the construction and dedication of this public street, and this would complete that public street connection. So there's some substantial infrastructure costs with this project. This includes 10 2-bedroom, 1-bath units, 4 3-bedroom, 2-bath units. Total project cost is $3,292,000. Funding request is $500,000. This was revised from their initial proposal that was $650,000. The other funding sources proposed are RHID and the housing investor tax credits. Again, this is already in a district that's been established, but when a district is established and then there's a project, there's a separate development agreement that has to be approved for that project. So that would still have to happen with this project. But it is, the RHID has already been established. Next slide. These are the floor plans and elevations. Next slide. That's end of the slides, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
So Mike, how do they determine the MHA funding request per unit? Is there a formula for that, or is that like some are 15,000 per unit, some are 20,000 per unit? Do you know how, is that the person making the request?
Yes, so the proposer requested those funds. One of the questions we asked is, what's the need for those funds? And they respond to that, and then we just, divide the number of units by the funding to determine the funding per unit.
The amount, okay.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for Director Hall?
Would you go back to the slide of which you provide the recommendations?
Sure.
To the committee, please?
Yeah, so the recommendation is Prairie View Estates, also known as Prairie Fire, and then the first 2 projects proposed by Heartland Design Build.
So I could be wrong on this, but Heartland Design was asking approximately $20,000 per structure
For those particular projects, it's 20,000 per unit, correct?
Okay. And then Prairie View Estates was a little under 36.
That's correct.
So I know that we aren't sure how, how the matrix in which the application is going to be judged, but is there a ceiling that a project can ask for besides the 650?
Nothing that's specified in the
community.
RFP, the request for proposals from KHRC. Nothing in our conversation with KHRC has stated a specific ceiling. They have been a little vague about that, but I think the term that I heard from them is right sizing. So, you shouldn't be asking for more MIH funding than's necessary to subsidize the project, because it really is a subsidy to the project. And so that is something that's taken into consideration.
And I know that you had indicated that we anticipate that there will be several rounds of MIH funding that will come down. If a community is awarded MIH funding, does it go against, is there a cap? Does it go, or do we know? And you might not know.
That's the big question. I think I've asked that question 3 or 4 times in different ways, and I don't think,
get an answer.
I think really it's going to come down to how competitive it is, how many proposals they get. The thing that I see in their RFP is distribution of funds throughout the state. That's the goal of theirs. So, yeah, they want it to be spread around. So I think we just don't know at this point.
And the current housing study that we have indicates that the tremendous need for middle-income housing, correct?
It does. It seems to emphasize apartments, multifamily residential. And that was something that when we asked for your input earlier, you indicated that you were more interested in that than single family. And just looking at the permits we've issued over the last few years, we haven't really issued permits for multifamily. We have issued for duplexes, if you want to consider that multifamily, but even then, not that many compared to single family detached. So I think there's a understood, acknowledged need for multifamily residential. And if you talk to property managers, just people in the community that are building projects, the vacancy rates are pretty low. So there's a need for a supply of housing. That seems pretty clear.
And Michael, up there we see that the Heartland Design, they've got 2 different projects there, A and B, but would that be presented as one project to the state when we do this? Or is it separate like that?
We would submit these we would identify them as different projects.
Oh, okay.
We don't have to do that. My understanding, we could say, but I don't know if it's going to really matter. I think they're going to select what they think is worthy.
Okay, I was thinking they're going to select 2, but we've got 3 recommendations. Is that correct? And then we have to decide priority and number, what we prefer, 1, 2, 3?
You should do that. I don't know if you have to be that specific about it, but their RFP indicates that you want to state your priorities in case they have to make a decision, I guess, and they will consider your priorities.
Okay, makes sense.
Commissioners, any other questions for Director Hall? Do what? I'm sorry?
Can people out here ask questions?
She wants to know if she can ask
Public.
questions. It's not really,
Public has questions.
yeah. I'll let you ask a question, yes.
I just wondered if there's a.
Can you come to the microphone, please?
Thank you.
Ruth Jansen, 741 South Tremont. I just wondered if there is a cost advantage to building like a duplex as opposed to a single-family dwelling in terms of shared walls and site preparation and those kind of things.
you want to take a crack at that? You, yeah, Director Hall?
I think there are contractors in the room that can probably better answer that question. There might be some cost advantages to having common walls, but
Yeah, there certainly is. I mean, in my mind, you can put more on the property than just a single family unit. You could certainly put more bedrooms, shall I say, which is what we're trying to achieve at this point. So, Commissioners, I certainly we asked the applicants to come tonight, and I certainly want to give each of us the opportunity to ask the questions of the two applicants that I know they're in the room, and possibly, do we have anybody on Zoom? No, okay. So if we happen to have the third applicant on, but before we do, just so I'm 100% transparent here, I have a business relationship with one of these one of these applicants, and I've stated this multiple times. The additional duplexes that will be built or could be built for Prairie View Estates, I was the electrician on the original project. I will recuse myself from any conversation that we have. Certainly, I don't want to feel like I'm swaying in any way. I do have one question, though, that I will ask of each of the applicants. It's the same question, so I don't feel like I'm at all, swaying any kind of conversation. I just want to, in my mind, have that question answered, but I just wanted to get that out there so the public and all of us know for sure. So, if you're ready, I'd like to call the first applicant up, which would be the Heartland Design Build, Mr. Joseph Thomas. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Thomas?
Oh, okay.
Oh, please raise
yeah.
it, please.
If you don't, he's going to
Oh,
bother you.
he's
about
gonna
it,
come
so-
show you how to
better
do
for you?
it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be,
Use
keeps
this
it
nice
well-
technology.
I've got a question. I guess if you have that, the one on South Walnut and then the single-family dwellings, if we had to just pick one of those, which one would you prefer we take?
Well, I guess yeah, I mean, I'd probably aim towards the ones on the north side of North Cedar and East Red Jacket, but, you'd asked earlier about combining them into one scope. I don't have any, problems with that
We
if
could do
that's
that.
what you wanted to do, to just say, to submit those 6 units as one project. That's, plenty fine with me.
And that's what I'm kind of thinking too, if it makes a difference for our presentation to combine them into one, that way we can get them both in there somehow if we could.
Yeah, when we were preparing the response to the RFP, we just, tried to lay out like we did project A, B, C, and D, and put in our cover letter that we could, we'd be fine with any number of these being selected, depending on what the committee felt like they needed. And with the single family for sale, like in Westwood, was just a recognition of changing market conditions, and as you're aware, changing interest rates. Our hope was that some of that MIH funding could be used to help the homeowners. Those are truly moderate income, for sale properties there. That'd be a moderate income family purchasing one of those, and that would help them, buy down the interest rate, preferably to get in that home long term and try to, not going to be able to wind back the clock all the way on the interest rate, but certainly try to get part of that way.
I understand. Good, thanks.
And following, I guess, Commissioner Skidmore, I would agree that combining them would make sense. The dollar amount per unit on all of those is the same. And I do think whenever it comes to review, having it as one item probably is a little easier to approve than having multiple yeses. And I do think both of those are needed. Obviously, the north side has need for housing, and this would complete the lot of the old Lincoln School.
Director Hall, is there any issue with us combining those two projects? I know they're set up as separate right now.
I don't think there's a specific issue with it. I think if you're combining them, you're kind of like saying, take all 6, or don't take
Or nothing.
take any of them.
Yeah.
Because it does say you can submit multiple projects. So I don't know if there's an advantage to combining them. One thing that we were told is, we actually met with KHRC staff and at their offices in Topeka, and one thing they mentioned was they've seen projects that they were not necessarily on adjacent lots, They might have been on a block or 2 blocks. They didn't say they were, I mean, these are pretty far apart. So I think the suggestion I'd make is not to combine them, because I'm not sure I see the advantage in that. I could be wrong.
I guess I was thinking if they're gonna select 2, then it could be 1 here, and, is that right?
So, Commissioner, there's no limit on how many they
Okay.
can select.
Just we will, okay.
They
It's
just,
just $1.
your total application, your total grant, well, your application for each round and grant cannot exceed 650,000.
That's what, okay. And so these number 2 and number 3 here would qualify for that. They're not gonna be over that figure, 650. Okay, gotcha.
So all 3 of these, we could include in the application, and it wouldn't exceed 650,000.
All right, got it.
And I think maybe to answer some of your questions as well, Commissioner Skidmore about, and Commissioner Kaler about the, cost per unit. But between the 6 units, we're asking for an MIH grant of $20,000 per door. And I'm an analytical person, so I went back and looked at the 2021 round of MIH, the applications received, because those are available online. And I believe there was like $8.3 million total of applications submitted throughout the state, with 28 applications, and they selected 8 of those applications. And looking at the dollar per unit or home that was awarded, or range anywhere from $5,000 all the way up to like $83,000 per unit or door. But of the 20 applications that weren't awarded in 2021, the lowest dollar amount per unit or home was $20,000 per door. And so, we were trying to look at making this the most the most competitive bid that we can put together for our hometown to try to go after these dollars. And similarly, in 2020, the dollars that were awarded, there were 7 projects, and they ranged anywhere from $16,700 per door to $40,000 per door. So we kind of felt like that, 20 to 25 was the sweet spot. And as far as the 3 proposals that were reviewed by the selection committee, our dollar per unit, we were at 20,000. Ottawa MIH is at 35, and the Pinnacle was at 20,300. But then, our units are probably targeted towards a little bit larger families. And so looking at the dollar per bedroom for the requested MIH, we're at $8,000 per bedroom. Ottawa MIH was at $15,625 per bedroom, and the Pinnacle proposal is at $20,156 per bedroom. So I just bring that up again to highlight we're just trying to do our best to be competitive, to bring the most number of units and the most number of bedrooms to the community using the resources available through the MIH grant.
And so the duplexes will be rent?
Yeah,
And
all,
the
both all
single-family
project A
homes?
and B are all rentals.
Okay,
Yep.
everything's rental, okay.
Mr. Thomas, what happens with your projects if you do not receive any MIH funds?
Well, honestly, we'll probably proceed, but at a much slower pace. I mean, this really, frees us up to move forward, and especially, like I mentioned, just the changing environment right now is kind of scary, to an extent, to be thinking about certainly taking on all these projects as fast as what we'd like to. So this certainly helps us, move forward with a lot more confidence in the project and the performance, and, looking after the interests of any people we bring on as financing partners in the project.
And Mr. Hall, this may be for you, but I appreciate that line of questioning, because there is a timeline assigned to the build of these particular homes or these particular structures, correct?
The expectation is that the projects can be completed in 18 months. And so there's not a lot of infrastructure for part of the design builds 2 projects. It's already there.
Mr. Thomas, do you see any troubles in meeting that design?
No
Timeline?
problems, no reservations at all.
Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Thomas?
You're good with numbers. Did you get that from your mom or your dad?
Maybe both, huh?
Like you said, I would just reiterate, I did the same math too, so I like that you did it as well on per bedroom instead of just unit. I think, like you said, $8,000 of funding per bedroom is a pretty low dollar amount for the benefit we get. And I think that's something I would like to consider and the commission to consider as well.
Thank you. We
All right.
appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time.
That'll move us on to the Ottawa MIH Partners. Mr. Maines. Good evening.
Good evening. Rudy Maines. I live here in town at 22 East Rockwood Drive.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Maines?
Can you go back a slide? Sorry, just so that we can see the recommendations that we were just looking at again. It's 14 units, yes, Mr. Maines?
That's correct.
And not all of those, remind me, some are 2 and some are 3 bedroom?
So it's a mixture of 2 and 3 bedrooms, correct?
I guess we'll ask you the same question too. 18 months can be completed?
Actually, all 3 projects, in my opinion, can be completed in that.
It
You
shouldn't
know, I'm
be a
gonna,
problem.
I'm pro all 3, whatever housing we need here in town. I'm here to support all 3 of the applicants, actually.
That's good.
Mr. Maines, I'll ask you the same question. What would happen to your project if you were to receive no MIH dollars?
So phase 2 was always set up. It would be shelved for a little bit of time. And actually, I don't know the time frame of that now. Initially, it was going to be a 5-year plan from when phase 1 was complete, because that was always the time frame of what KHRC used to want to see. They wanted to see a project complete, and they wanted it to be stabilized before another LIHTC project would come in with the moderate of what we've done on phase 1. Recently, we have some more that's going to come in now on Princeton Circle down there, which is, we're only 3 years into ours. So that shows the desperate need of what we do have here in housing, okay? Because KHRC would never have done that in the past, brought in more housing within that 5-year time limit of one coming online. So that's a positive for us. They know our need here, and they're listening, and I think that speaks volumes to what we're doing here in the community and our housing needs.
And on the roadway on this map, does that go all the way west? It would connect all the way
it will.
through?
So currently, we have a stub right there. The road is stubbed. We have water there. We have sanitary sewer there. And actually, we have a sewer line that goes on the back side of the north units that are proposed there that go ahead. It goes all the way out to Cherry and is connected. The 3 units on the south end there, we will have to do an extension from those units down to the parking lot of that clubhouse there. So that's the only sewer line extension. So other than that, we have all the utilities in place. The biggest expense is obviously going to be the road extension, which is going to go from the stub on out to Cherry. So when you're doing these projects and you're looking at the dollars, the big cost is the infrastructure. And we typically range anywhere from $30,000 to $35,000 a unit for that infrastructure cost. So when you factor that in and you start looking at what our request is per unit, that's the factor. When you're putting in the infrastructure, whether it's these duplexes or those apartments, you're going to be in that range. I've done the apartment complexes. Mr. Crowley can tell you the same thing. He's been involved with them, and they're substantial. The amount of utilities and the infrastructure to go into these, it's costly. And that's what derails every one of these projects. It's the site cost.
So can you give us just, if we walk back a little bit, for the public, and I know that we all up here know, but phase 1, tell us about phase 1.
Phase 1, I really have to say, from an owner perspective and being in this community, I couldn't be more proud of what it's done up there. Beautiful community. It's a community within a community of what I promoted when we first brought this to town. We have a clubhouse there that is really used by the residents there. We have art galleries. We have a lot of different activities up there, ice cream socials. Anybody that's not familiar with it up there, I highly recommend you go up there and spend some time and witness some of this. So phase 1 is very successful. I get calls all the time. I mean, Walmart, people are just desperately wanting to get into Prairie View Estates up there. we shut the waiting list down at 300 people. There's 300 people on a waiting list up there for this property. So coming into phase 2, although it is market rate, that's one of the bigger demands that we have up there is to get into that more of the moderate income. They'll be filled as fast as we can get them built up there. So also just being on the north side of town, I think if you've looked, everything that's happened up there since this has gone in, there's been a lot of cleanup of a lot of different houses up through all that area, and that's pretty exciting because, you know, the north end of town has been neglected for a very, very long time, and it's starting to take shape up there.
It also appears that there's still a little bit of room left to grow after phase 2.
So there still is 3 more units in, and I wanted to do them all. But when we get into the sizing of what our moderate allocation of what we can pull, it's a business model. So what we do, we call it, it's just levers and pulleys. It's all math, which everybody knows. Ross will get up here and tell you the same thing. But when you get into these things, you're sizing a business model and you're looking at a debt service coverage. So when you get to there, it's just a simple amount of math that it doesn't allow the other 3 units to get done with this financing. I'm not saying it doesn't get done through this because there's also economics when you're doing things. Those really ought to be done.
Thank you for explaining that. We'd always love a park there. I can't stop myself from saying that, you know
Well,
that.
we do have some parks up there. We got a soccer field
Yeah,
across the street that's
that the city owns.
used.
Yes.
It's used a lot, right?
Yes.
And then the only reason why there's not a park there when we initially looked at this is because we have the school next door with all the playground, and that was worked out with the. I mean, so there's gates there for us to get in and whatnot. So it's very successful up there.
Feel free to build a splash pad if you'd like.
Splash
Mr.
pad would be
Maines.
good. So.
Sorry.
Hey,
No
I
offense,
won't
Rudy,
go
either.
there.
Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Maines? Thank you. Appreciate your time. Commissioners, I do believe we have a representative for the 3rd project. Mr. Vogel, do you want to come on up? Good evening.
Good evening, Heartland Housing Partners, Ross Vogel. Echo what Rudy said and appreciate what Rudy said. Doing moderate housing in communities like Ottawa is really difficult. The economics don't work. We are fortunate that the state of Kansas and the legislature took extraordinary efforts over the past during the past legislative session, so we can all be standing here considering these opportunities. First of all, Heartland's project's a great project. I wish that every community had someone, and I don't actually know his name. We talked for a minute. Had someone doing what he's doing because it's important, it's good, it's needed, it's the right price. And Rudy's project's great. It's been extremely successful from both a LIHTC perspective and from a moderate income housing perspective. The project at and it's actually Mr. Wilbank's project. He's a local business owner, Real Park. A similar project was built, MIH project in Tonganoxie, or is being built right now. I think the biggest thing that sets us apart, it's going to be uber competitive. I do this across the state. We'll have multiple applications coming up, and it's going to be uber competitive. You would think that they grew the program from $2 million to $15 million a year, and everyone would be successful. I think the reality, it's going to be much more competitive with that much more money because more people have gotten interested, which is great because the needs there. I think just on the need side, we're 15 years out from the Great Recession in 2008, and the reality is in communities like Ottawa and Emporia and Wellsville and places near here, housing hasn't been built in 15 years. And we were here in 2016, there was a hint of desperation, and the reason the legislature acted is now there's real desperation, right? That you can't get it done. So pleased to be here on behalf of our project. Because of that competitiveness. Having more units is going to be advantageous to your community to be successful. Plain and simple, the leveraging that you need. I think the other issue that's real is you're a community of 10,000 people. And as we work I work throughout the region. Hey, I hear Ottawa really needs some housing. Ottawa does really need housing, and they need as many units as you can get. This application offers that opportunity to get as many units as possible and still be financeable. So, and to the numbers that were mentioned before, we're at 10,000 a bedroom as well, 20,000 a unit. We've looked at every way, and one of the things we've done, Randy and I have worked together, is understanding how all the different incentives work together to make sure that Randy's successful, but also deliver a product that hits your median family income. And that's not easy in Ottawa when we're looking at kind of $47,000, $48,000 per person. So be glad to answer any questions.
I know one of the concerns during the study session we had was that the property was still under contract and hadn't been closed on, if I'm correct.
Yep, that's correct. And
And
it should
there's-
be a concern.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
potential, because it will need to be rezoned as well to have this done, correct?
Yeah, listen, I've been involved in a lot of projects that hadn't closed by the time we were standing at this point. That property's been at sale, I know, for at least 5 years. So I don't expect it to go anywhere on that issue, but valid concern. On the zoning issue, once again, fair comment, it's a downzoning. It's really hard to imagine anyone that would be interested in a commercial project there, but I suppose they could. So I would think that zoning wouldn't be a problem. But it's a very valid concern. It also comes with the territory of saying, hey, we're in a process that's trying to get done fast and it's a little bit loose. And I don't mean in a bad way, the process has forced us to be that way.
Yeah, Ross, I noticed your rent rates were quite a bit lower than the others. Is that any reason for that, or is that works for your cash flow, I guess, still?
Yeah, I tell you this, if it were my project, they'd be higher. And I don't know if Randy's walked in, he had another meeting. Randy and I met about 3 years ago, and he has daughters that are teachers, and his passion is getting price points that work, and he's just really passionate about it. And I'm just being really serious, and one of the reasons I continue to work with Randy is because he's passionate about making sure that that price point works for the end consumer. When he said $1,050, I was a little low. I was working on one today that is not quite the product, and we're about $1,200. So Randy could hear, he could tell you why, but Randy's business is, he came from a supply background, and he is his own supplier on everything, including his trusses and everything, and he just grinds it really hard, which would be really good for your community.
Yeah.
We have asked the other applicants about the 18-month timeline.
Yep.
And considering the additional work that will have to be done on this project, acquiring the land, the rezoning, the tax credits, et cetera, is the 18-month timeline something that you believe is doable at this time
I'm so glad you asked.
in completion?
Sure. As we started looking at projects, I heard that 18-month timeline, and for projects that we've experienced in the past, it's just not possible. And so I wrote an email on a couple Mondays ago to Alyssa Ice, who's the director of the program, saying, hey, specifically kind of mentioning projects or projects like this one, and mentioning projects in maybe a smaller town, or if we were to do a project here and do, say, 20 homes at one time, but we know absorption is going to be 5, and said, Alyssa, this 18-month timeline, I think we're putting some projects at a disadvantage that are good projects. Her response, and I'll just read you what response. She happened to respond today. I didn't prior to respond today. This is helpful insight, and we're going to consider how to address the 18-month completion requirement in the current draft RFP. I don't know, but I'll expand on that. It has to do something with, there is a portion of this MIH funding that is ARPA money, and ARPA money has to be spent by a certain time. I suspect that's why that 18 months kind of started hanging out there. They just can't hold people to it unless it's a really small, limited project.
And Commissioners, if I may, Director Hall and I went to the KHRC seminar last week in Wichita, and that specific question was asked to Alyssa. And Alyssa's response, and correct me if I'm wrong, was they're not going to hold you to the 18 months. If the project is in process, and they can see that progress is happening, then, you know, they'll continue that timeline out. Now, I don't think that's an indefinite, you know, continuation. But certainly if progress is occurring, that they'll continue that timeline. Now, if there is no progress, you know, if they're not able to acquire the land or something like that, then certainly that's a concern of theirs. But that question was asked and answered by Alyssa last week.
This project is not among the recommendations that are listed for the very first round of, it doesn't reach to the time submitted. Is this a project that you would continue to work on, possibly the second round?
No. First of all, you have to have, to your point on the lease rate, take this pencil. And my assumption is that 60 million is going to go in a hurry, and this is probably out of a shot. And I was talking to someone in a much bigger community saying, well, you can look at these two projects, but you should probably count that it may not be the first round, it may be the third round, but you may have just one shot. I think it's going to go really quickly. I mean, if you look, I mean, this is not a perfect way to do it. 105 counties, $60 million, one project a county. Franklin County will have more, but I would suspect it'll all be gone.
Okay.
I'm wrong a lot, by the way.
Me too. That's my kids.
Yeah, don't I know it?
Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Vogel? Thank you. We appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, appreciate your consideration.
Well, Commissioners, we've certainly asked them some good questions tonight of the applicants. Do you want to have a discussion now, or would you like to wait till, I know we have a meeting Monday. We could have a discussion Monday of these projects. I don't think we're looking for an answer tonight, but if you certainly want to discuss it, we can. If not, we can have that discussion while these answers are fresh in our mind.
I would say have a discussion now while obviously the three applicants are here, in case any questions come up tonight. We obviously don't have to make a decision, but I would think fleshing some of those questions out would be good while they're present.
Yeah, to me, it's going to be a tough decision because all three have some strengths that I see that, boy, I'd love to have them all going on here. I think we could probably fill all these units in a short amount of time if we can do them all, but we're going to be limited, I realize.
Well,
And I would agree. Oh, go ahead.
no, please.
I would agree. I think the 32 units from Pinnacle fills our need the greatest. Obviously, it's the most units, it's most bedrooms, and the price point as well definitely hits that moderate income, the working class that we're kind of going for. With that, I do think there are obviously some roadblocks in terms of infrastructure and other items along there as well. And it's only submitting one project, which, you know, if this does go fast, as it may, the $65 million could go really fast. If we submit and don't get accepted in the first round, that may be a potential concern as well.
Commissioner Graves, do you have anything?
I mean, this is the first time that I had seen it, the information in the binder, and it's definitely a lot of information, but I've been watching the meetings from home and keeping up on what's been happening, and I've said it before on other things, and I feel like we have experts for a reason, and so I would trust the staff's recommendation. I feel like they have probably looked at it every which way, and I would go along with what they suggest.
Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore?
And same thing, I'm just kind of, I need to look them over. I appreciate all the comments tonight. That's helped me get some more information, and the more informed we are, the better the vote will be, I feel. And so this has helped me tonight to look this over. But yeah, I think we're gonna need some more time to really sit down and think and look this over and keep crunching numbers and see what it looks like.
Mr. Kaler, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, this is a great problem to have.
Yeah.
And certainly one of the more likable problems that we've had while I've been on the city commission. And I would take many more of these if we could. But I do agree. I don't like to, as individuals know who watched me on the city commission, I don't like to make decisions when things are presented right in front of me. I like to sit about it and think about it, and that would be no different than this decision.
I just have two comments. One, I think it's absolutely wonderful that we have 3 applicants, and every one of them are somehow based out of the city of Ottawa, whether they're residents or business owners, or they have some skin in the game for sure, you know, on this. So it's wonderful. And I too certainly think we should, you know, have that discussion Monday. That gives us time to get some input from the public also. We certainly value their opinion and would like to hear if they have anything else that they'd like to add to this conversation. So I think that being said, we'll continue this on to Monday. That'll move us on to comments by our city manager.
Thank you for your work tonight, commissioners. That's it.
Thank you. Comments by city commissioners. Commissioner Graves,
I have no comment.
Commissioner Kaler,
None at this time.
Commissioner Clayton.
Only a quick one about the fireworks display. That was terrific. I don't know if everyone got out and had a chance to see it. The weather was really nice, and even though it was a little bit late, it was a really good show.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Skidmore.
I heard it was the best Labor Day fireworks display in the state. So, that's a great thing to take a note. I just briefly want to say, too, we got 2 big weekends coming up with the tractor show, not the tractor show, the Power of the Past show. There we go. I saw some of our city crew working in Forest Park today, getting it spruced up and looking good. In fact, our whole city looks really good. The corners on Main Street, everybody's pitched in a lot to make this all happen. So really appreciate all those volunteer hours to make it look great. And then, of course, the car show the following weekend. So let's really promote it. Let's get it out there and enjoy it. I think it's going to be a great 2 weekends.
Thank you. My only comment is, Mrs. Campbell, I'm not sure how you did it, but some of your students stuck around after the 30 minutes that's required.
Good job.
So I think they should get extra credit.
Yes.
So appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
We need to have.
Or you're writing their next paper, right, Mayor Crowley?
You don't want me to write it, I promise. That'll move us on to our announcements. We have a study session at 4 p.m. September 12th. Also, 4 p.m. September 19th. And then we have a regular meeting at 10 a.m. on September 21st. Is there anything